I was 18 during senior spring break in Cancun, and I was there with one of my closest friends from high school. It was our first trip without parents, and because we were with a bigger group from school, it felt a lot safer than it probably should have. We were staying at one of those all-inclusive resorts where you get a wristband, eat at the same few places every day, and after 2 days you start recognizing the same faces by the pool. The setup was pretty simple. Our room was on the same floor as 2 other girls we knew, and a few guys from our school were across the courtyard in another building. During the day, everybody was either at the beach or sleeping off the night before. At night, there were always cabs lined up outside the resort, and a lot of people went to the same bars and clubs in the hotel zone, so it got easy to assume anybody around our age who was out there was basically in the same situation we were. My friend and I had gone out that night without the larger group because everyone else was dragging their feet getting ready, and we got impatient. We figured we'd meet up with them later. That was normal by that point in the trip. You'd leave with 2 people, lose them inside some crowded place, then find somebody else from your resort an hour later. Outside one of the clubs, a man started talking to us while we were standing near the entrance line. He looked older than us by a lot, maybe 40s, but he was with a woman around his age and a younger girl who looked like she was maybe 13 or 14. That was the first reason I didn't think much of it. It wasn't just some random guy by himself. It looked like a family. The younger girl was the one doing most of the talking at first. She was friendly in a way that felt rehearsed, but I didn't catch that right away. She asked where we were from, whether we were seniors, how long we were in Cancun for, the usual stuff people asked out there. The man kept joking that he was the chaperone, and the woman laughed like this was all normal. They told us they could get us in faster because they knew one of the promoters. That actually tracked with how things worked there. Half the people outside those clubs were trying to wristband you, stamp your hand, or wave you towards some side entrance. The man talked to someone near the velvet rope, and a few minutes later my friend and I were being let in without waiting as long as everybody else. At the time, that just made them seem helpful. Inside, it got a little stranger. The younger girl stayed right by us almost the entire time, not in a clingy way exactly, just constant. If we tried to move toward the center of the club, she came with us. If we stepped off to the side to text our friends, she stayed there too. The parents kept appearing every few minutes like they were checking on us. I remember thinking it was odd that they'd brought a girl that young into a place like that, but I also told myself maybe their family was just weirdly loose about stuff. At one point, the woman asked where we were staying. I gave the resort name without really thinking. That was another dumb thing people did there. Everybody kept asking each other what resort they were at, because sometimes it meant you had mutual friends or were on the same shuttle line. She got this quick look on her face when I said it, like she was filing it away. Then she said they were staying not far from there, and that their hotel had a better beach access area than ours. The guy bought my friend a drink, which she didn't even finish because we'd already had enough by then to be cautious about anything handed to us. He wasn't pushy in an obvious way. That was what made it worse. He acted patient, like he knew if he just stayed around us long enough, we'd eventually go along with whatever he suggested. The first real break in routine happened when I finally got a text from one of the girls back at our resort, asking where we were. I told her the club name, and she said they were at a completely different place about 10 minutes away. My friend said maybe we should just leave and meet up with them. When we said we were heading out, the whole family changed. Not dramatically, but enough that I noticed it. The younger girl immediately started saying we shouldn't go yet. The man stepped in and said the lines outside were getting worse and we should just go with them afterward because they had a ride back to their hotel. Then the woman said we could hang for a bit in their room because it was closer and safer than wandering around trying to meet people. It was the first time I felt that embarrassed kind of alarm, where you don't want to make a scene if you're reading it wrong. I told them our friends were waiting. The woman asked where exactly. I said I didn't know, just another club. Then the younger girl asked if our friends were guys or girls, which felt weirdly specific. My friend squeezed my arm pretty hard, like a silent way of saying we needed to go now. We started toward the exit and the man moved with us. He kept talking like he was helping, saying things like, "No, we'll walk you," or "Don't go outside alone, it's not safe." The thing was, we hadn't been alone until they attached themselves to us. I remember realizing that and getting cold all over. Outside the club, the street was packed, but still somehow felt less safe. The family stayed right beside us. The woman was trying to talk to my friend while the man kept steering me toward the curb where taxis and private cars were pulling up. He pointed at one of the vans and said that was theirs. I said no. He smiled like he hadn't heard me and opened the sliding door anyway. That was the moment it stopped feeling socially awkward and started feeling clear. There was nobody else in that van that I could see. No bags, no beach towels, nothing that made it look like a family vehicle. Just dark seats and a driver I hadn't noticed before. The younger girl was suddenly quiet. The woman had stopped pretending to be casual. She just kept saying, "Come on, just for a little, just till your friends answer." My friend grabbed my wrist and pulled me backward, hard enough that I almost lost a sandal. I said, louder this time, that we were leaving. The man's face changed completely then. He dropped the smile and said, "You don't want to be out here by yourselves." Not yelled, just flat. We turned and headed straight into a convenience store on the strip instead of standing on the sidewalk any longer. I think that's what saved us from getting separated, because it was bright and crowded and there was a guy behind the counter plus 2 tourists in line. We went all the way to the back by the refrigerators and pretended to look for water while I texted everybody I knew in Cancun at once. When I looked back through the front windows, the family was still outside. That part bothered me more than anything. They weren't arguing with each other or leaving or flagging down their ride. They were just standing there, watching the entrance. One of the guys from our school finally called me, and I told him exactly where we were. He and 2 others got there in maybe 10 minutes, though it felt much longer. We stayed inside until we saw them come through the door. By then, the family had moved farther down the sidewalk, but the van was still there. The guys walked us to a cab line they trusted and took a picture of the taxi number before we got in. On the ride back, my friend said she thought the younger girl had been using her phone to photograph us earlier in the club. I hadn't seen that, but once she said it, I remembered the girl holding her phone low toward us more than once. We didn't sleep much that night. We kept checking the peephole whenever anybody walked down the hallway. Nothing happened, and part of me felt stupid in the morning, like maybe it had just been aggressive nightlife people trying to get us somewhere else to spend money. Then around noon, one of the girls from the room near ours came over and asked if either of us had been out in the hall really early, around 6. We said no. She said someone had knocked softly on their door twice, then on ours. Not pounding, just a couple quiet taps each time, like whoever it was didn't want to wake the whole floor. She looked through the peephole after the second one and saw a young girl standing there, alone for a second, before an older man stepped into view, and both of them walked away. That was enough for me. Maybe they'd followed the resort shuttle route. Maybe they'd gotten the resort name from me and tried their luck. Maybe it was somebody else entirely. I still don't know. But we spent the rest of the trip moving in groups, and my friend and I stopped telling strangers where we were staying. Even now, if somebody I don't know asks me that on a trip, I lie automatically. I was 19 when my boyfriend and I took our first real vacation without our parents, down to Mexico during spring break. We weren't doing anything wild. It was more of a cheap anniversary trip than a party trip, which is probably why we let our guard down. We stayed in a small hotel outside the main tourist area because it was cheaper, and most nights we ended up walking farther than we meant to. The area around our hotel was a little awkward if you were on foot. There were restaurants and shops in one direction, but the sidewalks would randomly narrow or disappear, and after dark, the roads got a lot emptier than we were used to. We'd been using Google Maps the whole trip and usually just walked or grabbed a cab back if we were too tired. I remember being annoyed that night because my sandals were rubbing the back of my heel raw, and I mostly just wanted to get back, shower, and go to sleep. We'd had dinner and walked around longer than we planned. By the time we decided to head back, it was late enough that the street felt different. Not dead quiet, but less normal. Fewer couples out, fewer families, fewer lights on in shop windows. We stood near the road for a couple minutes until a taxi pulled over. I got in the back seat first, and my boyfriend showed the driver our hotel on his phone. The driver nodded right away like he knew exactly where it was. That part mattered later, because at the time it made me stop paying attention. If someone acts like they know where they're going, you relax. The route should have been simple. We'd driven it before, and my boyfriend even had the map open during the ride. At first, nothing looked wrong, because everything outside was unfamiliar enough that I couldn't judge direction on my own. I just remember noticing we were moving fast and not hitting the turn I expected. My boyfriend leaned forward and said something like, "I think we turned back there." The driver said, "Road closed," and kept going. That sounded possible. We were in another country. We didn't know the roads. There was construction in a lot of places. So we let it go for maybe another minute. Then he passed another chance to turn around. Then another. The street lights got farther apart, and there were fewer buildings. I asked how much farther. He didn't answer me, just said something to my boyfriend in Spanish too quickly for either of us to catch, then sped up again. I told myself I was overreacting because being lost in a cab is a pretty ordinary problem. I didn't want to be the panicky tourist assuming the worst because a driver missed a turn. But then my boyfriend turned the brightness all the way up on his phone and showed me the map. We were no longer even close to the route. We were headed away from town. I still remember how black it looked out the windows. Not scenic dark, just long stretches with almost no buildings, no open businesses, no people on the sidewalk. The road itself was there, and the occasional sign, but past the shoulder it was mostly trees and open dark. My boyfriend told the driver, more firmly this time, to pull over. The driver ignored him. That was the first undeniable part for me. Not the wrong turn, not even the speed. It was the fact that he stopped responding once we made it clear we knew he was off route. He had no reason not to answer us, unless he didn't want us thinking too hard. My boyfriend started raising his voice and saying we wanted out now. The driver kept driving for maybe another 30 seconds, which felt like a lot longer when you're stuck in the back seat of a moving car in a place you don't know. I had that horrible practical thought people get in the middle of fear where you're still trying to organize stupid details. I remember checking whether I had my room key in my purse, like that mattered. Then the driver finally braked hard near the side of the road. There was nothing around us. No gas station, no lit storefront, no other taxis lined up. Just the road, trees, and whatever weak light was coming off the car itself. My boyfriend threw money toward the front and opened the door before the taxi had fully settled. I got out right after him, and the cab took off almost immediately. It didn't wait to argue over the fare. It didn't try to explain. It just left. For a few seconds, I think we both were still half convinced there had to be a normal explanation. Maybe he really was lost. Maybe he thought another route was faster. But if that were true, he wouldn't have kept going after we told him to stop. And he wouldn't have dumped us there and sped away. My boyfriend checked the map again and said we were around 9 miles outside the city. That number made me feel sicker than anything else. It wasn't a wrong neighborhood. It wasn't a few missed turns. We had been taken a long way out. We started walking because there wasn't anything else to do. The road shoulder was uneven, and I was in sandals, which I regretted every 5 seconds. My boyfriend kept looking behind us, and I kept thinking I heard cars slowing before they passed, but most of them didn't. The few that did go by just kept moving. I called the hotel once and couldn't get through. My phone signal kept dipping in and out. We considered calling the police, but neither of us knew how useful that would be in the moment, when our immediate problem was still just getting back somewhere populated. We were trying to conserve battery and think practically, which is harder than it sounds when you're in the dark on a road you never meant to be on. After what felt like forever, but was probably under 20 minutes, we saw a small lit area ahead that turned out to be a roadside stand or tiny store, the kind with a cooler and snacks behind a counter. It was closed, but there were 2 men outside smoking and talking near a parked truck. Under different circumstances, that would have scared me too, but at that point, the light alone felt like relief. My boyfriend asked in broken Spanish whether they could call us a cab or tell us how to get back toward town. One of them looked at the map and immediately said the driver had taken us way too far. He didn't act confused about it at all. He just shook his head like he'd seen some version of this before. That was another thing that stayed with me. One of the men made a call for us, and we waited near the storefront under the light. I remember there was a dog sleeping under a plastic chair and a stack of soda crates by the wall. Those details stuck because my brain latched onto anything ordinary. The second taxi driver was older and seemed annoyed on our behalf before we'd even finished explaining. My boyfriend showed him the hotel location, and he said, in English, "I know, straight there." He kept the meter visible the whole time and talked more than I wanted him to just because I was so relieved he was normal. When we got back to the hotel, the night clerk told us we weren't the first tourists who'd come in saying a driver took them off route. He said to only use cabs called by the hotel desk or stands they trusted. Again, practical advice we should have followed in the first place. We didn't report it that night because, honestly, we were exhausted and shaky and embarrassed by how close we'd come to being stranded worse than we already were. I also had no good identifying detail except that the cab was white, with a number I hadn't memorized. But the next day my boyfriend checked his phone timeline and screenshots from the map, and the route line showed exactly how far out we'd been taken before being dropped. That proof detail bothered me more than the memory did. Seeing it as a clean line on a map made it impossible to minimize. For the rest of the trip, we had the front desk call every cab. We stopped wandering after dark, and I wore actual shoes when we left the hotel, which sounds minor until you realize how fast a normal night can turn into walking down an unfamiliar road because somebody in control decided to keep driving. I still check the route every few minutes now, anytime I'm in a cab somewhere I don't know. I was 22 when a friend and I went to Ocean City for a short spring break trip. We didn't have a huge budget, so we split a hotel room right on the beach and planned to just stay for a couple nights. It wasn't meant to be some crazy week. We mostly wanted cheap drinks, a boardwalk weekend, and a break before classes started up again. The hotel itself had one of those attached bars that looked nicer at night than it did in daylight. During the day, it was obviously just a hotel bar with sticky floors and too much blue lighting. But once people were in there and the music was up, it felt like an easy option because you didn't have to go back outside. That first night, we'd already been walking around for hours, so staying in the building sounded easier than trying to figure out where else to go. Our room was on an upper floor facing the parking lot, not the beach. You needed a key card to get into the side entrance after a certain hour, and the elevators were near the lobby, which meant anybody from the bar could see who was heading toward them. That didn't bother me then because it was a hotel. People were always going up to rooms. It felt public enough to seem safe. My friend and I went down to the bar pretty late, maybe around 10:30. We found 2 stools near the corner and ordered drinks. There was a bartender working that side who was friendly in that standard bar way where they remember one thing about you and keep using it. We'd mentioned we were there for spring break, and after that he kept calling us the college girls. Nothing about that by itself felt alarming. If anything, we thought he was trying for tips. There were a few guys sitting 2 seats down from us who started talking to us after hearing that. Again, normal enough. One asked where we were from. Another asked how long we were in town. And then one of them asked whether we were staying in the hotel. I said yes. Then he asked what floor. I laughed and said, high enough, because I didn't want to answer that exactly. He smiled, but not like it was a joke. More like he was waiting to see if I'd say it anyway. My friend changed the subject, and the conversation drifted. That should have been the point where I got a little more careful, but I didn't. We were in our own hotel. We weren't walking down some random street. The bartender was right there were other people around, and everything still fit inside a normal night-out framework. A little while later, the bartender set down another round we hadn't explicitly ordered yet. He said he'd started making them because he saw our glasses were almost empty and thought we wanted the same thing. That also didn't feel impossible. Bars do stuff like that when they want to keep people spending. The drink tasted off. Not bad exactly, just stronger and flatter somehow. Less like what I'd ordered the first time. I took a few sips anyway, because I assumed maybe the proportions were just different. My friend noticed it too and made a face. She said hers tasted weird. I wish that had been enough to make us stop right there. The next part is where my memory gets uneven. I remember being much more affected than I should have been, and fast. Not in the gradual drunk way where you know you overdid it. It felt like my body skipped several steps. My arms got heavy, and I had trouble keeping track of where conversations were starting and ending around us. I asked my friend if we should go upstairs, and she looked at me in this delayed way that scared me even then because she didn't seem normal either. I remember trying to pull my phone out to check the time and fumbling it onto the floor. One of the guys nearby picked it up for me. That would have been a small, helpful thing in any other context, but I still remember how he held onto it 1 second longer than necessary before handing it back. The next clear memory I have is being in the bathroom off the lobby, sitting on the closed toilet lid with my head against the wall while my friend threw up. I don't remember us leaving the bar area. I don't remember paying. I don't remember getting from our stools to that bathroom. That gap is what bothered me later more than anything. A hotel employee, not the bartender, knocked and asked if we were okay. I said yes, even though we obviously weren't, because I was still in that half-embarrassed state where you don't want strangers turning a bad night into a bigger scene. My friend said we just needed to get to our room. We somehow made it upstairs. I know we did because I woke up in my own bed around 4 in the morning, still wearing jeans and one shoe. My friend was asleep on top of the covers with the room door deadbolted and the chain on, which at least meant one of us had enough awareness left to lock it. The room looked wrong in small ways. My purse was dumped halfway out on the carpet. The ice bucket was in the bathroom sink. One of the key cards was bent. None of that proved anything by itself, and I spent the first 10 minutes after waking up trying to reconstruct a normal explanation, where we'd just gotten way drunk and been sloppy. Then my friend woke up and asked me if I remembered going back down to the lobby with that bartender guy. I said no. She didn't fully remember it either, just flashes. Him asking if we were okay. One of the men from the bar standing nearby. Somebody saying they could help us get upstairs. She remembered clutching the wall near the elevators because she thought she might pass out. After that, almost nothing. Both of us got sick again that morning, way beyond a normal hangover. We were shaky, dehydrated, and confused in a way that didn't match the amount we knew we'd actually had. I remember looking in the mirror while brushing my teeth and noticing my tongue was stained this bright bluish color. I thought it was from a mixed drink or candy until my friend said hers was the same. That was the first concrete thing either of us had. We went downstairs later because I wanted coffee, and because part of me needed to see the bar in daylight to decide whether I was being dramatic. The bartender from the night before was there setting up for lunch service. When he saw us, he gave this quick smile and asked if we'd had a rough night. Then he asked, casually, whether we were checking out that day or staying another night. I hadn't told him we were only there for 2 nights. I'm sure there are ways he could have known that through the hotel system or maybe overheard something, but after everything else, it landed wrong. My friend immediately pulled me away and said we were not drinking anything in that building again. We checked out early instead of staying the second night. On the drive home, we compared what little we both remembered, and it lined up just enough to make the missing pieces worse. Same weird-tasting drink, same fast drop in awareness, same guys asking whether we were staying in the hotel and what room we were in. Same blank stretch. I called the hotel a day later and asked whether they had any incident notes from that night or lobby cameras near the elevators. The manager said they couldn't release footage to me, and without filing a police report, there wasn't much else they could do. I understood that, but it still felt useless. We didn't file one. We probably should have, but at the time we were both more focused on getting home and pretending it hadn't happened. The one thing I still come back to is the room key sleeve I found in my purse a week later. On the back, in pen that wasn't mine, was our room number written clearly. I know I didn't write it. My friend didn't either. Maybe it had been written by the front desk when we checked in and I somehow never noticed. That's possible. But I still don't stay and drink in the same hotel anymore, and I never tell anybody at a bar where I'm sleeping. If you like this content, like and subscribe. The full video is on my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.